Ladies and gentlemen, once again, back is the incredible Counsel Culture, where it's not about canceling, but more about seeking counseling. And I'm joined by my brother, my partner in all of this. Been with me for my day one now.
Day one, my friend.
Yes, Dr. Mike Dow, New York Times bestselling author. We say that every time we introduce you because that's quite the accomplishment. And your newest book is something that we're going to talk about today as well, as because a lot of people don't even really know what it is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it's Ketamine Breakthrough. The Ketamine Breakthrough is what the new book is called, and Ketamine Therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, forgive me for being a novice. Forgive me for my ignorance in this space. But, I've always been one of, I've smoked a blunt or two. You know what I mean? Participated in the sweet Chiba. Even went down to the Mario world and have a love for mushrooms and psilocybin. But ketamine always sounded like, that sounds like drugs to me. Like mushrooms, marijuana, those ain't drugs. Those come from the earth. But ketamine, especially when I hear this, like they're horse tranquilizers, and then when you hear, the dangers of them, please help me understand the difference from someone who can abuse something like ketamine or the fact that or may think ketamine is a drug, opposed to like what you do and what the Ketamine Breakthrough is all about.
Yeah, so one of the things that I love most in this world is providing ketamine-assisted psychotherapy to people. I find that for people who are suicidal, depressed, debilitating post-traumatic stress disorder, when combined with psychotherapy that I provide, this very specialized form of therapy, and low doses of ketamine, it works a lot more like psilocybin, and it really allows you to sort of quiet the ego and go into the places that you need to heal. Because listen, in talk therapy, sometimes it takes people years and their defenses are so good at like keeping people out that they can never access the core of who they are, or that wound that needs healing. So ketamine, like psilocybin, will sort of just peel back the layers of the ego, and it'll really help you to hone in on that, while also simultaneously being, in my opinion, the strongest, this fast-acting antidepressant. I think the strongest antidepressant on the face of the planet right now. If you give people who are suicidal, they are suicidal, they are so depressed, the majority of people in a study, after 4 hours of one dose of ketamine, no longer suicidal. We don't have anything like that, right? So in some cases, ketamine is saving lives. But going back, first of all, that's one of the number one things I hear. Isn't that a horse tranquilizer? We have to understand that, like most things in veterinary medicine, there are a lot of medicines. Most medicines are used for both humans and animals. Ketamine was developed. It is a man-made drug. It was developed right here, USA, Detroit, Michigan. It's been used by anesthesiologists and ER doctors for many years, since about 1960. And then in 2000, they started to realize, oh, that's so interesting. When you give somebody with really severe depression ketamine, or who has suicidal ideation, they're no longer depressed or suicidal. And then we developed this protocol where we combine it with psychotherapy. So it's almost, like a really deep session of breath work or hypnosis where you can go far deeper than any talk therapy can take you, because I find that is where the real healing, that's where it lies, right?
So ultimately, and just for clarity, because I want to break this down, the goal still is to get to a space where you can talk through your emotions and your feelings and whatever it is that may have you, I want to use the word properly, like not depressed, but or depressed, but in a way to like whatever it is that the trauma that you're working through.
In the low doses, yes, that is correct. In the low doses,
so we're not giving you this drug to make you feel better.
You're doing both. You're doing both at the same time.
Got it.
So without any sort of talk therapy, if you just took a really large dose of ketamine and listened to some music, that in and of itself is going to help with the depression especially.
So can you take me through the experience of once one takes, and tell me what the dosage normally is or whatever. Once you take this, what happens?
At the low doses, it kind of feels, so you're going to get this little injection, intramuscular injection.
And they're shots.
It's a shot.
You give it to yourself, or you got to get it from a doctor?
From a doctor.
Okay.
So I'm in the patient's home with my colleague, and we are, if there is, for example, trauma, right? In that case, we're going to deliver a low dose of ketamine. The low dose of ketamine, let's say 20, 25 milligrams in your shoulder, it's going to allow you access to reprocess the trauma. So then I'm going to be walking you through and going back to that time that in Afghanistan that you saw your best friend get blown up and you can't get rid of that memory. And I'm going to help you with these very advanced trauma therapy reprocessing techniques to really help that person. If there's somebody with really treatment-resistant depression and it's a little bit more nature than nurture, they just have always had this treatment-resistant depression. Right. Maybe we're going to give them a high dose, maybe 85, 100 milligrams of ketamine.
Okay.
They can't talk in that space. Then it's like psilocybin. Out. Then it's almost like you are in this oceanic consciousness. All is one. You don't know who you are. The part of you that knows your Nick Cannon, he can go quiet and you can be at one. There's this feeling that all is one that people have with LSD or psilocybin. Yeah. But then when you come back, there's something about the mystical experience that sometimes is this really powerful reframe. Because what is the problem with depression? You start believing one of the voices inside your head that tells you you're not good enough, or in an anxiety, something is going to go wrong. And you start to merge with that part of your personality and you become that part of your personality. If you can zoom out 100,000 feet for just 40 minutes and you come back into your body, sometimes there's this really powerful mystical reframe that happens that all people with psychedelic medicine report, no matter the medicine, man-made or from the earth like psilocybin, that really helps them to see their life in a new way. Because all of us, you're in that carbon shell, I'm in this carbon shell. Right. We've got my consciousness, you have a Nick consciousness, and we are convinced that the way we are perceiving the world is reality, when really everybody has their own reality. So it just gives you a little bit of space.
And allows you to go into a different realm.
Yeah.
So is ketamine considered a psychedelic?
It's not a classical psychedelic, but yes, it is part of what we consider psychedelic medicine.
So in that, you have to say that, or not to say you have to say, there's a large portion of society and specific communities that say, I don't care what you say it's doing in medicine and therapy and for PTSD, that is a drug that can be used and abused and isn't doing something good and is actually counterproductive. What do you say to those people?
Ketamine is a very powerful medicine and needs to be treated with respect. And there's a good subset of the population that should never touch ketamine.
Right.
There are also people that have tried everything and failed 26 antidepressants and still feel suicidal every day and do not want to live, who after a handful of ketamine-assisted therapy sessions come to this place where they feel like themselves for the first time in their life. I treated this physician who was about 60, and after his first session, he started crying, and I said, it looks like those are happy tears. He's like, it's both. I feel so relieved, but I also feel so sad. I had no idea. I've tried everything. This is the first time in my life that I know what it's like to live without depression. It's that profound.
And I've dealt with depression in the past and didn't really know how to express it or even explain it to somebody. And I'd have to say, and that's why I was like, I still don't even do it that much because I still don't understand it all the way. But in a psilocybin experience or like when you have a shroom journey, there is this level of emoting.
Yeah.
And like when I was like boo-hoo tears, like, and you're like, and you don't know if it's happy tears or you don't know if it's sad tears because you're feeling it all. So I don't know if that's the same way with ketamine, but it's like, it's just like, wow, I needed to get that out.
Yeah.
I needed to release that because there's no other time in my life where I would cry that hard.
Yeah.
Like if I'm at a funeral, I'll respectfully shed a tear.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'm an actor. I know how to like cry if I need to. Like, I know how, but like the level of like tears and snot and like just like letting go. Like I don't cry.
Right?
I haven't cried like that since I was a child.
How did you feel after? Was it like a release?
Healthy.
Did it feel? Yeah, exactly. It's healthy.
You feel like,
so that part of your ego that keeps the emotions at bay or guards them or says, "I'm not going to let you into this locked cage."
that release, and it's like not only is it the release, but you feel like you build yourself back up as well. And that's the other thing. Like all of that just happened. But that's the thing, because obviously we're trying to be extremely responsible here. We're not telling people to go, start a whole psychedelic lifestyle, because that stuff has to be handled with, and like you said, it's not for everyone. I've sat with many therapists, especially like a lot of addiction therapists, and said, don't touch any of that stuff, because it's a gateway, or it opens a door for manic episodes. And not, people kind of, you hear about like LSD all the time, that people go on a trip and never come back. Like, and again, because you said it should be monitored and be extremely responsible. But now when we hear, and we don't know, but we hear like even in something like a Matthew Perry, man, like where I don't know what happened, but in the media we hear the reason why he's no longer here with us is because of ketamine.
I think what's really interesting about his case, I think the first thing that people need to know is the amount of ketamine that he had in his system was so much higher than I would ever give a patient. Like that is not the dose we use in ketamine assisted therapy. So clearly, number one, way too much ketamine. Number two, with his history, not only his addiction history, but also his heart history, never should have been somebody who had ketamine to be self-administered. Right? Like we, in my practice, we don't allow patients to self-administer ketamine, and you certainly shouldn't self-administer ketamine by a pool or be in a jacuzzi, even an hour after. You don't want to be unsupervised in a body of water. And, he also had, as somebody in recovery, he was mixing ketamine with something that they use that really helps him with his dependency to opiates, right? So there was this other medicine in his system, and all of that really, I think, has this very negative stigma. But I think there's also something really positive in this, that the story is telling us that we really need to treat this medicine with respect.
Like it's medicine.
Like it's medicine. It is a powerful medicine, Nick. You do not want to give this medicine. I'm screening for schizophrenia, for bipolar disorder. It is not a good fit for those people. If you have a tendency, if you're manic, you do not want to give ketamine to somebody who is manic. You do not want to give ketamine to a pregnant woman. You do not want to give it to somebody who's schizophrenic. But there are all these other people that it is, I can honestly say that I have had multiple people that I have personally treated that it has saved their life. And it is probably the only thing that would have saved their lives.
That's interesting. Also, we hear about it like from other celebrities who have, been prescribed it. Like close friend of mine who, he talked about it in his stand-up, Pete Davidson. And he jokes about it, you know what I mean? But it's like when he's euphoric when he's on it. You know what I mean? He had his joke that I found to be hilarious is that he was on ketamine at Aretha Franklin's funeral, and he wanted to pay his RSPBC, however you spell it. but in that sense to where someone can, find levity, especially like knowing Pete. I know he's someone who's been through so much in life. From the loss of his father to even his own challenges that he's had with his own health throughout life. And just I love that dude like wholeheartedly. But knowing that someone who, like, I get nervous when I hear about my friend, even if it's prescribed, because it's like when you deal with someone who's had issues, like you said, like even with Matthew Perry, like if someone, it's mind-boggling to me that doctors somehow, if you have addiction issues, will still give you another drug that you can get addicted to?
Well, if somebody takes methadone is a very highly addictive drug, right? So I think ketamine has a stigma that methadone does not. If somebody's addicted to opiates, you're going to give them something else that is highly addictive. You could never get a prescription for methadone, right? Because we only use that when there's a history of opiate use disorder. That person was addicted to heroin, addicted to pain pills.
Right.
By the same token, there are some people, so you're using an addictive medicine to treat the addiction.
Right.
Ketamine, for some people, not all, and you've got to be really careful. If that's a gray area, right? Using ketamine-assisted therapy for addiction.
Yeah.
You've got to be really careful. You don't want to give it to the patient to just self-administer.
Right.
You really want to make sure they have a lot of respect. They're doing the work so that they can get out of the journeys what they need. What is blocking them? There's a lot of really deep psychotherapy that happens, and if you can find that aha moment, that wounded inner child, or if you have a sense, a lot of people with psychedelic medicine, there's this very famous case of this woman who was an atheist, and when she came back from her journey, she said, I was bathed in God's love. And they're like, but you're an atheist. She's like, that's the only way I can describe it. Yeah. If you have a mystical experience like that, you can imagine what that can sometimes do.
Yeah, I took a bunch of baths with God too when I was on shrooms.
And it's remarkable. I know there's been a lot of celebrities. I treat a lot of celebrities with this medicine. Sharon Osbourne, not my patient, has been very famous. And
we love her.
This trauma after, getting fired from the talk show, Talk, and, she really needed it to really heal that trauma. And there are people probably like Pete and, some of the people who are dealing with loss and his father in 9/11. And his story what a wild story.
Wow.
Some people, I tell people, I don't know what people believe, but if they've lost somebody, I say, you may encounter a loved one.
Get to talk to him.
I'm not going to tell you, I'm not your pastor. I'm not here to tell you, well, that was the angel, your father. But if you believe that was your father's spirit coming through, sometimes your father's going to say something to you that could change your life. So be open to that.
So you, as a therapist, you've seen people go on these ketamine experiences and come back and say, I talked to God, or I talked to my loved one, and now I see things completely different.
Yeah, this woman, I remember her saying after her first or second journey, she had suddenly lost her husband, was in talk therapy every week. And after the first or second journey, she's like, I'm okay now. And and the question was like, well, why are you okay now? She's like, because I now know that he's okay. Talk therapy can't give you that. You know what I mean? Like she had this sense. She was
just made everybody want to go get some ketamine now.
Her spirit, she saw, she
get to
felt
talk to
his
Big Mama,
spirit
give me some, hit me up.
On the other side. And that spiritual component, I think spirituality is missing from mental health. And I think for some people, and in this increasingly secular world that we live in, I think religion is really important, or spirituality is really important.
Absolutely.
And I think we've made science so cut and dry, and it's like, oh, well, you have a serotonin problem, so take this SSRI. But we forget that, spirituality affects neurotransmitters, and it's a part of your mental health. What I love about ketamine-assisted therapy is the ketamine is working on your neurotransmitters. You will get these increases. Your brain will get better. It really helps your brain to make new brain cells, but it also gives you that spiritual that some people need. It opens portals to your subconscious.
And like you said, you got that's also delicate and sensitive areas as well.
It is.
So just for the understanding, is there like street ketamine? Is it like?
Oh yeah.
So there's ketamine dealers out there.
There are ketamine dealers.
And it's still through injection or the ketamine pills?
No, some drug users will figure out ways to inject it, like they figure out ways to inject other medicines. But usually the street ketamine is snorted.
Really?
Yeah, just because what they do is typically the most common route of black market ketamine is they get the vials, either from a veterinary clinic or a black market, and they turn it into a powder, and then they snort the powder.
Wow.
That's
a lot.
That indeed can be addictive. So probably the one area of concern, you don't want to be doing ketamine all the time. Right. It can cause irreversible damage to your bladder lining that no medicine can fix. So if you're somebody partying with ketamine all the time, I would say you better be really careful and be prepared for a lifetime of bladder pain.
Wow.
If you're doing it hundreds and hundreds of times every weekend, you don't want to abuse ketamine.
Wow.
You can become addicted to ketamine, like people can become addicted to all sorts of things. You know, like, oh, weed is not addictive. Weed is
Absolutely addictive.
Addictive, right? And there are some people with a pain condition who are going through cancer treatment that is the only thing that helps them. So we've got to be less black or white in putting things in categories.
Right.
Alcohol and nicotine are these two legal drugs that cause
the number one
a
killers.
lot of harm.
Yeah.
And yet those are like, maybe not nicotine as much these days, but in the 60s, that was still, it was in like the alcohol category. It's like, oh yeah, your doctor says you should smoke some cigarettes. Right. Today, you know, alcohol, it's, you know, we know that it's carcinogenic. It causes a lot of head, neck, throat, prostate, breast cancer, you know, and you can use it.
Irresponsible trauma that, you know, just of intaking too much and just
that's right.
becoming an alcoholic.
So if you are somebody who's enjoying a glass of wine like I like to do, great. If you're somebody who's having alcohol morning, noon, and night, it will do so much harm to your body. You'll become so physically dependent on it. So I think there's just a lot more nuance when we talk about these medicines. Even, you know, caffeine is a medicine, you know, it's like,
right.
It's not, do you drink coffee? It's like, oh, do you take caffeine? Do you take alcohol? Do you take ketamine? It's like, how are we using these medicines? They're not good or bad.
So you have
somewhere in between.
You have to be responsible in the process.
Yeah.
That, I mean, that's heavy, especially even like, you know, I think the spookiness of fentanyl these days.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and the fact that you don't even know that it's in some of your drug, and the fact, but again, that's a medicine, right? Like that's a medicine that,
correct.
You know, anesthesiologists and different doctors, you know, give you during surgery, right?
And another reason not to abuse street ketamine, because they can cut it with that too, right? It's in cocaine, it's in ketamine, so you know, you just want to be really respectful with these medicines.
Man, so I mean, clearly you're an expert on this space, and it sounds like you have great respect for it. If once one grabs, you know, the new book, the Ketamine Breakthrough, what do you want people to get from that?
I want people to know that when used with psychotherapy in the right way, this work can make your brain better.
Right.
You know, so ketamine does all sorts of things in the brain. It increases neurogenesis. It boosts something in the brain called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is like
all right, now use all these big-ass words, Doc. Go back.
The brain.
What's neurogenesis?
It is the birth and creation of new brain cells.
Really?
Yeah.
So ketamine can create new brain cells.
It boosts this miracle grow chemical in the brain that helps your brain to make new connections. And the other thing, like psilocybin, it helps your brain to connect in all these different ways that are totally abnormal, right? It's not the usual ordinary consciousness. It's this non-ordinary state of consciousness. And when the brain connects in these different ways, it's so wild. You know, there's this phenomenon of synesthesia where it's like you can taste the color green, right? Because your brain starts connecting in these different ways that are so unusual. But in that, you know, there are a lot of studies that have shown that psychedelic medicine enhances creativity because you get out of that narrow way of processing information.
Right.
And it's almost like you're returning to this childlike consciousness before the ego came online, and it's just sort of siloed all of the visual, the auditory inputs and the narrative that goes along with those inputs and the stories we have about anything. What if you could just take that away for an hour?
Right.
And then come back to that narrative? You can kind of poke holes in stories that you tell yourself.
Right.
And that leads to enhancements in creativity, which is really interesting, which I think is why a lot of the people in the creative arts and the creative industries really enjoy this medicine. And if you are somebody who is struggling with severe mental illness like depression, to not have to take a pill every day, and a pill that, you know, ketamine doesn't have the side effects that those pills have, you know, most notably sexual side effects, weight gain, and sort of that feeling of emotional blunting. Like a lot of people on SSRIs will say, well, it took away the lows, but it kind of cut off the highs too. Ketamine doesn't have that. It kind of makes people feel more like themselves, people say.
Right. And when you administer, how long does it last for?
In the lower doses, 30 minutes. In high doses, it can last for an hour and a half.
So that specific experience, but the takeaway from it in your, whatever you received from that journey, hopefully is life-changing.
Yes, and it often is. And then how you make sense when you come back into it, that's where the magic is, right? There's this idea of the hero's journey that's a part of, like Star Wars, all of these great stories, like The Wizard of Oz. It's like you go to this other land, Oz, you have some profound experience, and then you've got to cross the portal back into this ordinary world. And what is the magical elixir you're going to take with you? So when I'm talking to patients and I really help them to understand, oh, I get it. Like, there is something that I need to do in this world. I was put on this world to produce and parent. Right? And it's like, oh, there's some, I was meant to do this, or to love, or to create more joy. So what are you going to do with that, right? So now your everyday actions, and this is where, everyday talk, cognitive behavioral therapy can help. Okay, so what does the doer in you who's going to do these things every day, how can he help you to fulfill that mission that you got a clear download. You saw it. Maybe God gave it to you. Right. Maybe your mother's spirit. Maybe you just had a sense of it. Now what do you do with that? How do you thread the needle and take it into your life?
The hero's journey.
Yeah.
I like that.
It's in my book, The Ketamine Breakthrough, and I have people fill out the hero's journey like, oh, okay, this is where I'm at in my journey. This is the struggle. This is the problem I'm dealing with. This is how I'm going to transcend it. And the medicine really helps that to move forward in a way that's really profound.
Have you ever worked with or dealt with someone who is very religious or spiritual, and what is their experience like? Because again, most religious people believe that, church or even the Bible, Jesus, those elements will bring them, they don't need the ketamine to have the hero's journey or to get revealed of what their purpose in life and all that. Like, how does that work when having a patient that is super religious?
They often have some of the deepest, most spiritual journeys, but can I tell you something that will blow your mind? There is now research, there is this psychedelic fungus, right? And there is this scholar who, he spent years researching, like going to the Vatican and getting access to like the top secret parts of the Vatican and artifacts. And there is now actual evidence that this psychedelic fungus was part of the early days of the Christian church. So when we talk about the mysteries of communion, that there was probably psychedelics in the wine. So in the when we go back 2,000 years,
everybody in the church get tipsy.
I mean, can you imagine a small dose of a psychedelic and then, like the mysteries or, some of the things that, all of the incense or, whatever's part of your tradition, can you imagine how it would actually enhance that? There's actually a Christian church. It's one of the loopholes where you can use ayahuasca. So it's a Christian church, and they use ayahuasca as part of their communion, their worship. And this medicine is illegal unless you're part of this Christian church. Then you can use it. So it actually enhances those people.
That church.
So I think the separation of the psychedelic medicine and people who are part of a more traditional spiritual tradition, maybe there's just a lot that we have in common, because I identify as a religious person, and I identify as somebody who's part of the psychedelic community.
Right. I mean, again, I know they're gonna be getting at us in the comments on that one too, because those are, when you merge those two worlds, I mean, it can, because there are so many strong beliefs of what the Bible says you should and shouldn't do. But then when you explore this new realm, and then like you said, when you think about the origins and where everything comes from, in order to actually experience those other realms, actually hear from God. You have to let go of anything that feels ordinary. You have to let go of anything that is restrictive. And if you believe in those ideas of catching the Holy Spirit or even of hearing from God, you're going, that's extraordinary behavior. That's not, so there's definitely a coalition.
You want to know why I believe in God?
Tell me.
Because I felt God. Like, I have felt God in my own ketamine assisted therapy.
Right.
I feel God. I am not the kind of person who can have somebody, and I grew up in the church, the Christian church. I can't have somebody tell me this is what you have to believe because I said so. I can't. That doesn't for
make
who
sense.
I am. For some people that works for you.
Yeah.
I have to have an experience, and I'm the
own
kind of person.
Personal experience.
So I believe in God because I've experienced God.
Right.
But if I don't experience God, I can't know that God exists. And if you're that person, ketamine-assisted psychotherapy may be a spiritual process.
So the big question is, before your ketamine experience, did you feel or did you believe in God before this?
I did, but it deepened it. I've had other spiritual experiences where I've just, and frankly, some of those have been in church. I've wept in church. I've wept in church. When there's a song that touches something in me, I can weep then.
Right.
But man, the spiritual experience I had with psychedelic medicine, it was that times 100, and it was almost, man, just thinking about it now, it's almost too overwhelming to even comprehend. It was such a profound experience that I'm changed. Like I'm changed because of it. It's why I just believe in it. Again, for some people, not all people, but for some people, I just believe in it so much.
Well, we're wrapping up this session, but I definitely want to dig in deeper on that world, because you just touched on a lot of stuff with the world of religion, you being an openly gay man, you having an experience with God, it being enhanced by ketamine. There's so much to unpack there.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that we'll actually, for our next session, we'll bring some of the comments into it.
Yeah.
Because again, there's probably many people out there like you, but then what are those emotions? What are when you say you feel this? Are you? A lot of people say when you weep in church because you felt convicted by something, or you felt clarity about something, or So I would love to in our next session we get the opportunity to kind of unpack a little bit more of that as so many other things, because this is a safe space and a brave place to have these kind of conversations amongst men and women alike. But it's not about canceling. It's more about counseling.
Yes.
My man.
My friend.
Dr. Mike Dow. We out.